So far in our project, we've added CSS to HTML to start to create an aesthetic for our website, and we've used a little bit of code from other sources. So we've used Font Awesome to get icons, and we've used Google Fonts to get some typefaces on here. We've got a template page set up, and we also have a style guide page set up, and both of these give us a fair amount of typography where we can see how that's looking and make some decisions based on that. Hopefully yours is coming a little bit further than mine. I haven't really done anything with mine since the last phase of the project, but obviously there's some things that we would want to fix on here, like the way that this breaks, even though we've got this pill shape around these emphasis tags. It breaks if it goes to a new line. So those are some things you'd probably want to take care of. But overall, it's in pretty good shape for a desktop site, right? Our navigation bar goes across the top. We should have link states for all 4 different link states for every different environment of a link. And now the issue is going to be how this looks on a phone. So let me show you what this looks like if I move to the inspector mode, and if I put this on a phone and actually put it in a responsive viewing mode. So that's a little bit different from if I were to just shrink the browser size. If I shrink the browser size, you see how everything starts to kind of stack on top of one another. So it moves in a fluid way, but it doesn't really resize for the screen that it's on. But if we enter responsive mode in the developer tools, you'll start to see some more issues that we need to deal with. So since we're using rims for our typography, it's still behaving in a reasonable way. Except for up here, you notice how my navigation bar looks tiny, and my footer also looks tiny. So I'm going to still need to do some things to make my site responsive. We've been learning about responsive web design, and we've learned that it's a little bit time consuming if you were going to do it from scratch. And so what we're going to be doing is using a framework, a CSS framework, to help with that process. So we're going to be using Skeleton because it's a really simple CSS framework, and hopefully you've learned a little bit about that in the previous tutorials that you've been told to watch. And you know that it's basically just giving us a responsive grid. It gives us a 12-column grid that we can use, and we can span certain numbers of those columns to create different layouts. And then when we hit 550 pixels, everything is going to collapse down into a single column layout. So again, if I move to my inspector, you can see here this grid that was provided on the website at full screen. Now, no matter how many columns of the grid each of these containers is spanning, they collapse down to a single column once we hit 550 pixels. So let's go ahead and get started with that process. The first thing that we need to do to be able to make our site responsive is going to be to update our template a little bit. So we're going to have to get back into the HTML before we can really get too far with using CSS. We're going to have to make a few more changes. What we can do, though, while we're on this website is go ahead and download the skeleton zip file. So you can see here, I'm just going to put it in my GRD 188 folder locally so I have it where I need it to be. And you may get a warning about it being insecure content. This has just started happening today on my browser. It's just because the skeleton website is not loading over HTTPS. The S in this case would stand for secure. And as web browser security increases, we're going to start seeing more warnings like this. But I happen to know this website. I know I'm on the right website, and so I'm not concerned about it because I do want this package. So I'm going to go ahead and click Keep. And now I'm looking at my website again, so I can move out of that mode, and what I need is a little piece of code that's going to make my website responsive. Before I start with all of that, though, I do want to do just a little bit more file management. We did this once before when we finished the HTML portion of our site, and so what I'm going to do now is select all of the folders. Well, hang on, let me create first a new folder, and I have my backup of my original site before I started adding CSS to it called portfolio-html. So I'm going to follow that same system, and I'm going to call this one portfolio-css. And I'm just going to take all of the stuff that makes up this website and put a copy of it in this folder so I have a backup just in case. So I need my CSS folder. I don't need the crash course folder. That's a tutorial. But I do need the downloads folder. I don't need the HTML crash course because that's a tutorial. I do need the image folder. I do not need the CSS portfolio or HTML portfolio. Those are my backups. And I don't need these packages of skeleton. I do need my style guide, I do need my template, and I need my web fonts. And I'm just going to copy those and then move into my CSS portfolio and paste them. And if I open this same template in the web browser, it should look exactly the same because it has all of the supporting resources that it needs and they're all in the right place. And so I can verify that my CSS backup is working as long as it looks the same when I visit both of those links, and as long as I can see that those links are opening up in a portfolio-CSS folder, all should be good. And the next thing I want to do is take a look at this wireframe. This is provided in the assignment instructions, and this just shows you what the layout's going to be when we're done. So what we're working towards is on a mobile device, so anything 550 pixels or less in this case, since we're using Skeleton. We want to see the top navigation bar stack. And if you notice, they stack in a specific order. This is kind of important to know. So when Skeleton starts to work, when these links are spread out across the top of the page like this, when they stack, they're going to stack from left to right and top to bottom. So the home page is going to be at the top, portfolio is going to be underneath that, resume underneath that, contact under that, and the PDF resume under that. And so we can see how that's going to work here. And so this order should be important when you're proposing a wireframe of a website at a responsive view, because you don't want to have them out of order. That's just extra work coding them. So if you know you're using a specific framework and you know how it works, you want to make sure that you follow the flow of that framework when things start to collapse. Now, additionally, down here, we've got all of our footer links, but you notice these are not stacking. And that's what Skeleton does. So once we put Skeleton into place, we'll be able to use Skeleton to achieve this layout, but we're going to have to override it on mobile so that, so basically what I'm getting at is that this is doable in Skeleton, right? This is actually going to be easier to do in Skeleton than it was for us to do from scratch. But for this, we're actually going to have to override Skeleton and the way it works to make sure that these stay stacked like that. So the first step in getting our template updated now that we're ready to go is I'm actually going to close this just to give you a quick reminder on the best way to open this. I'm going to drag and drop onto Sublime if I'm on a Mac. And if I'm on a Mac or a PC, I could also open Sublime Text first and then go to my File menu and go to Open. And I could still choose my GRD 188 folder, and it will open as a project where I get this browser along the side so I can see everything that's in my GRD 188 folder. And I'm going to continue working from this template that's right in my GRD 188 folder and my style guide and all of my other resources. I'm just going to overlook all of these folders that contain projects that are separate from this. So that would be my portfolio-HTML, my portfolio-CSS, HTML crash course, CSS crash course, and then whatever tutorials you've completed for the responsive web design and for the framework as well. So we're going to keep working with the sources that are part of this website. And the first thing that I need to do, I'm going to move to my template to update this. Now, eventually, I'm going to have to do most of the changes that I make to my template to my style guide as well, or it's not going to work. So what I recommend you do is that you pick one of these two pages and update it. I'm going to go with the template because it's the template. So it should be the one that's most up to date. And the first thing I need to do is add another meta element to my code here. And it's called the viewport meta. And that's what makes this website responsive. So I could start by adding a comment to my HTML that says something along those lines. The viewport meta makes my site responsive. And again, I can just highlight that text, hold down Command and slash to make it a comment. And after that, I just need to add in the viewport meta. And honestly, the easiest way to do that is going to be to look it up online. A lot of your code editors will probably hint it for you as well, but there's really no pressure to remember exactly what a lot of these more complex codes are. So a simple search for viewport meta will do. And probably one of the first organic results is always going to be W3 Schools. And when I come to W3 Schools, I get that meta right there. So all I have to do is copy it and come back to my template page and just paste it right there. And now what'll happen when I view my site in a responsive mode, even using the developer tools. When I come to that responsive mode, you notice now my navigation bar, it's a subtle change, but my navigation bar is not as small as it was before. So it's not this tiny little version, like a postage stamp or business card sized version of my website anymore. Now they're all stacking up like they were doing when I was resizing the browser. And so I can see I've still got a fair amount of work to do, but I can see that my site is now behaving like a responsive website. And so now it's going to work for me to encode any responsive functionality that I want to have. So one of the next things I need to do is just a quick check and make sure that everything I have is relevant. I'm going to get rid of this link to test.html in my home link. For now, I'm just going to replace it with a recursive link, just so I remember to update it. I would hate to launch a website that was linking to a page called test.html as the home page. And then I want to make sure that I have all of my footer links programmed in here. So now I should have all of them. I've got the sitemap, so that should be leading to the sitemap. I've got the desktop wireframe, which I still need to link to here, and the mobile wireframe, which I still need to link to here. So I can come to the mobile wireframe, and you can get this from the assignment instructions, by the way. But I'm going to grab the share link that I've provided to you as well. And I'm just going to replace the mobile wireframe href attribute with that. I should already have a decent title attribute there. And then I just need to find the desktop wireframe as well. So you may need to revisit a previous assignment. In my case, I'm just going to find it in my saved files here. And again, I'm going to come to the share link for it and just copy the public link. You have that public link in the assignment instructions from when we used it for the CSS assignment. And I'm going to make sure that I add that to my desktop wireframes href attribute. The validator should be working for HTML and CSS. And then the planning one should be connecting to my styleguide.html file. So everything else is good there. One of the last things that I need to do before I really get too far along in updating the code here is validate and just make sure that the code that I have is correct. So I'm going to do that by direct input. I'm going to select all of my code and copy it. And then I can visit my local page in browser and launch the validator. It won't validate again because I'm looking at the local version of it, and so the validator can't actually get to that code, but it can at least give me a link to the service where I can come to direct input and just paste that in and check. And what I'm looking for is a green light. I have a couple of things about Unicode and about these HTML character entities that it's warning me about, but those are just warnings, so I'm not going to worry about those. And for now, as long as it's giving me otherwise a green light, this is in good shape, so I can continue with that. If you have some warnings, it's really optional as to whether or not you want to fix them. But for the sake of time for today, I'm not going to bother getting into those. It would require me to do some research into Unicode, and I don't feel like doing it, so we'll skip it for today. And that means that my site validates, so I should be in pretty good shape to go ahead and move on with the next phase of the content, which is just going to be adding the skeleton components into my site. And we'll do that in another video since this one's starting to go a little long.